at Lincoln. Is that you? Okay. All right. And she is certainly amazing, and she's in the forefront of the local foods movement in this area, receiving a lot of grants, and she has big plans, I think, for the future. So we want to hear about this. So let's welcome her.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. As she mentioned, my name is Sarah Eber. I'm the Human Nutrition and Health Program Coordinator at Lincoln University Cooperative Extension. And I wanted to share with you a little bit about Arise JC. Okay, so you can see that the title is From Need to Reality, Fresh, Locally Produced Food for the City of Jefferson, Missouri. So this whole process began with a grant through the Environmental Protection Agency called Local Foods Local Places. And so this was a journey really from food insecurity and limited income opportunities to economic stability, better health, and reduction of chronic killers like obesity, diabetes, and high blood pressure. And it started with the idea of really developing a local food system. Our neighbors to the north in Boone County have been working on this for some time in partnership with the University of Missouri Extension. And many community partners and interested individuals have been very involved in this. Despite the unique nature of the diverse Jefferson City culture, this journey started in a very similar way. Jefferson City is inhabited by unique and resilient people with specific needs. So in 2020, Lincoln University Cooperative Extension, in partnership with Building Community Bridges and the City of Jefferson, applied to the EPA-Local Foods Local Places project. The award was granted, and this project supports a coming together around the development of a local food system. It's bigger and more holistic than the focus of the Local Foods Local Places project awarded in 2015. So with that kind of as your background, now I want to share with you the rest of the story, if you don't mind me borrowing from my late friend Paul. Okay, so this was an EPA-funded program, and it was a collaboration initially between Lincoln University Cooperative Extension, Building Community Bridges, and the City of Jefferson. And what this grant brought to us was a technical workshop. So what happens is the EPA pays a team of like 10 people to assist communities in developing their plan. So many, and I'll share some acknowledgements with you later. Once that plan has been developed and fleshed out, then it's our job as a community to make it happen. So with any luck, I want to give you a little background as to why this project was embarked upon. Ooh, thanks. Thanks, Dr. Watson. Is it going to let us show the video? I tried to embed it. There it is. You're awesome. Thank you.
The beautiful city of Jefferson, known as Jefferson City, Missouri, enjoys a rich, diverse history dating back to ancient times when inhabited by the mountain people. 300 years later, the Osage Indians. Nestled on the Missouri River, Jefferson City boasts rich river-bottom fields and tree-covered hills providing beauty year-round. Planned by Daniel Morgan Boone, son of the famous frontier man Daniel Boone, Jefferson City has the distinction of being the only city in the Union built to be a capital city. Traveling through the streets, you will see beautiful gardens, trickling fountains of clean water filtered from the hills surrounding the city. Whole parts of the city have been or are being restored to resemble the architect of the late 1800s. The city has a significant number of families whose ancestors immigrated from Germany or lived as slaves brought in to help build the city and farm the land. Most neighbors are diverse and live in a level of peace that many other populated cities do not enjoy. Jefferson City was named from Thomas Jefferson, the President of the United States from 1801 to 1809. Originally, the city was settled by 31 families and hosted only a general store and a hotel. Jefferson City is the home of Lincoln University. LU was founded by members of the 62nd and the 65th Colored Infantry. These men fought for the Union in the Civil War. They established what was in 1866 the Lincoln Institute to support education and higher learning for their families. In 1921, Lincoln Institute became Lincoln University, and it was established as an 1890 land-grant institution and is one of 2 land-grant universities in Missouri. Jefferson City is noted for its livable and relatively low cost of living compared to other state capital cities. Today, 43,000 people, including 17,000 families, call this city home. Many institutes from the past can still be found here, such as Central Dairy Ice Cream Parlor. Primary sources of income are public administration. While this is not a surprise given that it's a capital city, there are other industries including primary retail establishments, food service, and education. Agriculture as an industry is relatively low, especially when compared to other parts of the state. Over the years, the City of Jefferson has experienced a slow loss of jobs and income. Many families move out of the city and sold homes or develop them into rental properties. Despite this, many residents work hard to keep their houses looking good and yards kept. But like all cities, some part of the town has fallen away from public view and experiences the loss of local businesses. Many beautiful, majestic homes have been left to deteriorate. One area in particular, now referred to as the Southside neighborhood, has been hard hit with economic fallout, compounded by floods and tornadoes which have contributed to its demise. A group of citizens in the Old Munich-Burg Association, a community organization, began working with the City of Jefferson to develop a plan to rejuvenate the Southside neighborhood. Some faith-based organizations such as AME Church and Bible Way Church have also been working to support healthy spiritual practices and concerns for neighbors. Community-based organizations such as Building Community Bridges work to bring the community together, increase access to fresh local food, provide education, exposure to the arts, and a healthy outlet for youth to discover their potential. Businesses closing and abandoned buildings haunt the area, lending a blighted look. Transportation is a problem for many people given the high tax rates and reduction in public transportation. The topography of the area, while beautiful, reduces the walkability. The steep hills and narrow streets make traveling by foot difficult. Also referred to as an Opportunity Zone Track 105, this area of the south side of Jefferson City has become a food desert. The closest grocery store is more than a mile away. This side of the city lies on the south side of 2 heavily traveled highways. Many lots are abandoned and overgrown with weeds. Very few parks are within walking distance. Approximately 17,000 families make their home in this area, struggling to find and secure gainful employment. As we kick off Local Food Local Places in the Southside neighborhood, we look forward to what the future holds and happy endings to the rest of the story.
Thanks, Dr. Boston, for helping us out on that one. Okay, so with that said, I have to pull it out of there or something to move it on. That was a video done by a local business, a minority-owned business here in Jefferson City as a part of some of the Local Food Local Places work. And so what you saw there toward the end was kind of part of the vision that came out of the whole Local Foods Local Places project. So from that came an action plan. And so there are handouts that kind of go through that with you, but I'll just give you some of the highlights. One of the goal number 1 from Local Foods, Local Places, community coming together was to increase community awareness about local food availability, remove obstacles, and create opportunities to access fresh local food in the Southside neighborhood. And some of those pictures are kind of what's happened as a result of that. And I'll share more about that with you momentarily. Goal 2 was to improve food utilization, food program awareness, and public health education for residents of the Southside neighborhood. Goal number 3 was to stimulate and sustain economic development through well-staffed, well-educated, you can read it, well-educated food enterprises in the Southside neighborhood to connect community and build health. And then the 4th goal was to increase community food security and resilience through cultivating a network of community and home gardens in the Southside neighborhood to broaden community knowledge of food, growing, and self-reliance. So those are kind of 3 overarching goals that came a part of that plan. And I wanted to make sure we gave some special acknowledgement to the EPA and our folks from the EPA that stayed with us through the whole workshop and are still sending us grant opportunities as we speak. That's Lauren Combs and David Doyle. If you have more questions about the EPA and the hard work and how hard they're working to help us, please give me a call or feel free to email me. So you can also access more information about Local Foods, Local Places projects throughout the country at this website. If you put in EPA Local Foods, Local Places, you'll see all the projects that have been going on in 2021 were all the awardees last year. I also want to make sure, because as I share with you how things have metamorphosis has occurred, I want to make sure we acknowledge Dr. Majid El-Daweek. He's the Dean of the College of Agriculture, Environment, and Human Sciences, and Yvonne Matthews, who's the Associate Administrator of Extension at Lincoln University, for their support, building community bridges, and the City of Jefferson, who were key partners in starting this whole thing, and some of the folks that were a part of the Local Foods, Local Places workshop and really contributed to the plan. Beancounter Urban Farm, the University of Missouri Master Gardeners, Elizabeth Anderson, a County Engagement Specialist for Cole County, and all the members of the Local Foods, Local Places Steering Committee. Oh, yeah, she has Osage County as well, but you know, we're focused on us, right? Okay, she does both. Okay, and then so out of all of this came ARISE JC. The ARISE stands for Agriculture, Rehabilitation, Independence, Skills Training, Education, and I kind of put on there the nutrition and food safety as the education piece. It was hard to make that into a fun acronym, so just keep that in mind. That was the key, right? Okay, so the vision of ARISE JC was that we would see a thriving Southside neighborhood with multiple gardens, walking areas, fresh food, and a strong economy filled with families, fun, and a sense of community. And as we started thinking about that, well, that's what we want for all of Jeff City, right? So it's not really just a vision for the Southside neighborhood. This project values healthy kids, healthy families, and healthy seniors, increased careers and hobby interest in urban agriculture, equal economic opportunities for all, gardens and grocery stores full of locally produced healthy food choices, and good agricultural practices with a minimal carbon footprint that includes the production of climate smart commodities. And of course, a safe and steady food supply. And just as you know, we were coming off of this planning post-COVID, but since that time, those values have not changed, because I know all of us have experienced holes in the grocery store, or at least a 25 to 30% hike in the cost of our food locally and nationally. It's not just us. The mission of ARISE JC was to, we really want to cultivate and develop a leadership body united to support ongoing partner efforts. So there's still kind of a debate as to whether ARISE JC will try to apply for a not-for-profit status, because the focus of it is to bring a lot of different organizations together and facilitate what they're already doing or what they want to do. Okay, and because Lincoln University Extension is a leader in those areas, and Lincoln University Cooperative Research are already working in this area of urban farms and small locally produced farms, this is really key to Lincoln's mission as well. We want the mission is that our partners will work together to develop a sustainable local food system, identify areas of need, and develop, implement, and evaluate initiatives to meet that need. Okay. All right. So I just pulled in here. Yep, that's it. Some pictures of what's been going on since that time. So our first focus in is on community garden development. Now, back in the day when we, well, okay, so a little bit of history. Has anyone heard of Liberty Gardens? Anybody heard that term? So during World War II, right, that was something, local gardens were a kind of a normal thing, because that way you had fresh vegetables. It didn't matter what your socioeconomic status was, you were growing your own food, even if it wasn't a little bitty plot or little pots behind your house. So really, our need hasn't really changed. It just kind of took a nap for 60 years, 70, 80 years, right? So since the time of Local Foods, Local Places, I wanted to share with you some of the things that have kind of happened. So for example, upper left-hand corner to you, that is one of part of a garden with Bean Counter Urban Farms. Down below that is a neighbor who in right behind Building Community Bridges, and you can see they have a container garden. They have, and this is not grass. They've turned their grass into something they don't have to mow, which I think is totally awesome for those of us who don't care to spend all our Saturdays mowing, right? And then here you see with our health initiatives, we had a couple of events to promote vaccination, especially post-COVID. Here you see, this is a community garden developed at Bible Way, which is right down there. You saw that at the end of the picture. Remember, you saw those beautiful little gardens popping up? It's here. This is what it looked like before they all shot up. And I wanted you to see the community involvement here, because right next door is a housing development. That's the Housing Authority, a Section 8 housing unit that has a lot of concerns and issues and a fair amount of crime when the sun goes down. But look at the people who came out just because we were out there working on this. This garden was developed by Bean Counter Urban Farm and funded and supported by Bible Way Community Church, which is right across the street. Okay, so that was a totally cool situation. And of course, as an educator, anytime I had any kid within earshot, I was doing as much science and nutrition education as I possibly could. And you know, it's interesting when you're getting your hands in the dirt, you hear things better. So with the kids that came in and were planting seeds and plants had an awesome time, and they were able to just walk out to the garden, get okra and tomatoes and peppers and all kinds of things they grew. And then here I wanted to show you, this is the kids here at Boys and Girls Club. That's a picture of those kids there. And up high is at the Lincoln Commercial Kitchen over on Leslie Boulevard. And this was a project that Lincoln started a couple of years ago called AFCSM. It was Action for Food Security and Sustainability in Missouri. Because Lincoln has a fair amount of property at Carver Farm, the dean, in cooperation with a few of us at Extension, decided why not grow vegetables? We've got people who need vegetables, and the food bank is struggling to keep up. And this was during COVID-19, during the pandemic. And so we grew vegetables on an acre of ground and produced something like 43,000 pounds of produce that we were able to share with local food distribution areas. And so this was some of the produce that we sent to Boys and Girls Club. We also sent lots of produce to Little Explorers down over behind Helias and Building Community Bridges, because they have a food distribution twice a week. So we sent food to them. Then when we had a bunch of leftover hot peppers, which nobody wanted the children to eat, right, because they were super hot, this would have been one of those really hot commodities that was climate smart in its development, that someone could have made a lot of money on had they been growing their own hot peppers and selling them. For those of any of you who love hot food and all the the popularity with those hot sauces and habaneros and what's the Carolina Reapers, some of those super hot things. This is peppers that we dried and froze. Some we dried, some we froze at the commercial kitchen, and we're able to give out for community events, or for, we actually did a recipe competition. So we actually had some people who developed recipes and used some of these, some of the produce. So there's a lot of potential here. But the underlying piece of that really is, what does it take to make this happen? Skill and a willingness to do a little work, but there's also a really good chance for income. So that is the underlying piece of what's going on behind Arise JC. So in addition, the community gardens are the first step, and for obvious reasons, a very, very visual impact of what can happen. Okay, and so right now we have formed work groups, and you can see we've got operations, and we've got growth, community gardens, and programming, because the focus of this not only is developing urban agriculture, but it's also teaching people how to function and develop skills within the scope of urban agriculture, which is not only doing the farming, but there's food preservation, there's the engineering that it takes to build these community beds, there's the carpentry, there's the plumbing, because you got to find a way to funnel water. And I don't know about all of you, but I was trying to come up with some real creative ways to keep my sugar snap peas from croaking over dead in 90-degree temperatures today, because in May they're used to it being much cooler, right? And here we are at 90, and I really love my sugar snap peas. So we need, to be able to put folks in a position to learn some of these skills and then have a place that they can actually make money using those skills is an underlying factor. So that's where the programming comes in. It is a secondary and a third phase of this project, and that is to develop vocational training in all the areas surrounding agriculture. Of course, you can't do any better than partnering with Lincoln College of Agriculture, right? In addition to the partners Lincoln has working with technical things. So the programming would not only be for that whole skills training, right, but it's also about food safety and nutrition and resource management. So that is knowing how to eat healthy on a budget, how to preserve your food. So this was another program that I don't have the dates, otherwise I would share them with you. So please keep an eye on our website, because there's a calendar and it will tell you when these dates are available. But in collaboration with the University of Missouri Extension Community Outreach, we'll be doing food preservation classes in Jefferson City, right down there in the neighborhood that you were just looking at. And we'll also be offering them in Osage County as well this summer. One of the issues that I've heard from a lot of my constituents is that they really, when they utilize the food bank and some of those other things, when they utilize that food bank, they'll get a huge amount of produce, especially if in a seasonal situation. And a lot of times I ask them why they don't take it. And they said, well, I don't want it to go to waste and we'll never eat that much. So let's dry it and can it, right? So you've got it when you don't have it. So out of that need, Lincoln University is partnering with University of Missouri to offer that skill. And back in the day, if you look back in history, that was one of the first things extension agents did, was went out to rural areas, taught folks how to preserve their food in a safe and sanitary manner. So it's like back to the future, or the future back to the past. It's still necessary, and a skill that a lot of people were exposed to. They may have grandparents or someone who did it, but they didn't really fully learn the skill, or if they learned it, they didn't use it. So they've sort of lost the technical things. And I've had a lot of really great discussions with local retail establishments who are willing to support this. And I actually had a discussion with Orscheln's, and they told me, Sarah, we can't keep canning stuff on the shelves. You won't find it at Walmart. But how awesome would that be if there's enough of demand that Walmart brings it back, right? That everybody can access those things. So the reason for flashing, I'm gonna flash this slide up to you again shortly to tell you some, give you some, to hear your suggestions and to offer an opportunity to engage this really cool activity, right? Okay, so a couple of upcoming events that we have. We have, there's a grand opening. So do you remember during the video, you saw that expanse of green as we're talking about the blighted neighborhood, and you're like, that doesn't look blighted at all. Well, for those of you who may not have been familiar with that location, that was Mulberry Street in Dunklin. There used to be a housing development there that was torn down, and it is a vacant lot. Anybody familiar with that spot on Mulberry Street? Do you know why it's still a vacant lot? It's in the floodplain. That's right. So you don't really want people building buildings in the floodplain, right? What do you suppose happens when it floods? All those nutrients deposit themselves. So here we've got this plot of land that's sitting there, and the city was like, oh, first spot, let's develop that and let's put that into some vegetables and fruit if we can, right? And what do we need to do to make sure that we don't impede floodwaters should there be another one? So it's quite a challenge, but the city and the county and the emergency management agencies have come together to help Arise JC members who are working to develop this. And so the grand opening or the groundbreaking is the 11th. How did I get the 18th? Okay, so June 11th. June 11th, my bad, typo. I checked that twice. Okay, June 11th from 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock p.m. at Mulberry Street. So that's 601 Mulberry Street. Join us there. So there will be, that's a groundbreaking, and there's a fundraiser, but Bean Counter Urban Farm will be developing that and working with community members to build and sustain it. And that will be like almost an acre or half an acre of produce available for the neighbors. The other piece of this is not only do we want to put people in a position where they can grow their own food, but then when they have extra. So there's that concept of, okay, I've got plenty of food for me and my family. I shared it with my neighbors. I shared it with my family. I've got leftovers. Okay, well, I can preserve it or I can sell it and bring in at least the cost of my seeds or the cost of the extra water bill in the summer or whatever, right? So here we have an opportunity for a small scale urban farmer to make a little bit of money. May not be a huge amount, but a little bit of money and sell their produce. So Lincoln University has the farmers market every Saturday. Lincoln is also planning an indoor market that'll be open year round with refrigeration, and Building Community Bridges is planning to develop that same concept in collaboration with Lincoln University. Okay, so that you'll have a farmer's market available to you 3 or 4 days a week. And depending on which one you go to, like even the Lincoln Farmers Market is $25 for the year to be there. Doesn't cost much at all, and you can bring in and sell your produce. They're also developing that area so that it is a little more foot friendly, fewer cars, and has a produce washing station and food and education going on right there by and a community garden, which I'll share with you in a little bit. The other piece of that is a revenue situation, but then not only that, we've got a lot of folks that Arise JC is working with that are also incarcerated. So for those of you who have worked with anyone who's been through that system, if depending on your exit, it can be really difficult to get a good job. So part of this whole Arise JC Nice Vision plan is that will happen. It's going to be a reality that there is training, vocational training for everyone, regardless of where they come from in their walk of life. So it really raises the bar on equitable training, equitable education, and equitable nutrition. And for those of you who may or may not be aware, when you look at the health disparities like obesity and diabetes and heart disease and strokes, there is a huge difference between the Black population, the Mexican or Hispanic population, and other populations. Those chronic illnesses affect those populations at a much higher rate. Likewise, the current CDC estimates are telling us that 1 out of every 3 people will have diabetes by 2050. That knows no ethnicity. And part of the key to stopping that is the availability of fresh, healthy food choices and physical activity that's doable. So if your back or your disability doesn't put you in a situation that you can garden, there are a lot of other things surrounding this focus that you can do. So it offers a lot of opportunity for that. And that's, of course, where the Human Nutrition and Health Program comes in. Likewise, I wanted to make you aware of the JC Community Garden Tour. This is brand new, so you're just hearing about it for the first time. Everyone's hearing about it for the first time tonight. It will be July 1st, 2022. The times to be announced, and we may have a few more gardens that join us. But right now we have 6 locations that we will be traveling to. We will have some transportation available for folks who don't have a transportation available. So the Bean Counter Urban Farm, remember that picture I showed you a bit ago, the upper left-hand corner, I only showed you just a few of her vegetables. There's a huge amount. It's amazing what she's grown on 3/10 of an acre, okay? The Mulberry Street Urban Farm, you'll get to see what it looks like after the groundbreaking, and as 11th to the 1st, that will just be a few weeks. So I think you're going to see a lot of things change even in 3 weeks. The Building Community Bridges Community Garden, that is another one that is under renovation. So that'll be kind of fun to look at, not to mention the early stages of a sensory garden located right next to the old Family Dollar store. And then the community garden at Lincoln University, which is right next to the Dickinson Center and across from the small animal ruminant facility. And what I didn't put up here is not only will we go there, we'll also go across the street to the Finca. Okay, so the Finca is a Mexican term, a Hispanic term for a small, diverse farm. And so one of our state specialists, Dr. Nadia Navarrete Tindell, runs that. And you will be able to walk back into a little oasis in a very small space. There's berries, there's fruit, there's vegetables, there's all kinds of edible native plants. And she's also working on a lot of specialty crop developments. So the concept of a finca is that not only do you have vegetables and fruit, but that would also generally include small ruminants like a goat or sheep and a few chickens, so that you've got eggs and milk available. So our vision is that someday where you can roll through the Southside neighborhood and hear some goats baying, right? Because ultimately it doesn't take a lot of space for a goat, and it can provide you with meat and with milk. And as a part of the Arise JC partnership, we're also working with meat producers, and I'm talking about local beef producers with local butcher shops and processing facilities, so that you can get good, fresh local meat. It's only a couple of counties away. So that is also in the works. So there's a lot of things really starting to happen with this project. The Ramsey Garden at Quinn Chapel was begun there at the AME Church, right? Just across the highway. And they have received some grant funding and some donations, and it is going to almost double or triple in size to serve that area as well. And the Pinwheel Garden at Wesley United Methodist Church has been established for some time, and their focus on community gardening is a little bit different than some of these others. And that's a cool thing about Arise JC, is the idea is that as we work with people in terms of what they want to do, there's a group of the coalition itself is extremely diverse with a lot of expertise, not only academic expertise, but very practical expertise, people that really do know what they're doing and have been doing it a long time. So we need you and your neighbor to be a part of this. So this comes back to, remember I told you I'd pull this slide up in a little bit. So we have several people that have already volunteered. And so I wanted to take just a minute and share with you some of the members of the group, because it is ever growing and it continues to grow. And there's a real push right now to develop local and regional food systems. And the Department of Social Services, on the behalf of the people of Missouri, has applied for some funding to support regional food hubs and a lot of other things that can really make small scale farming lucrative from the standpoint that at least it covers its cost and increase access and availability to fresh and locally produced food. So some of the members of this coalition include the University of Missouri, Share the Food, Bring Hope, so that's the food bank folks, Building Community Bridges, Bean Counter Urban Farm, the Central Missouri Master Gardeners, of course, Lincoln University. And I want to point out too, behind the scenes of a lot of this, a lot of the specialists from LU were providing input and support as we were writing this grant, and continue to provide support for local farmers. For example, if you haven't heard about it yet, the advertising will come out soon. Dr. Gonzalez, Eleazar Gonzalez, offers a workshop at least annually for beginner gardeners. Okay, so you can go through the Missouri Master Gardener program through the University of Missouri. This one gets you started not only in gardening, but also marketing your garden produce, because that's his specialty, is marketing. We have a commercial kitchen at LU, and there's about 9 to 10 people that are working there now and have developed their own small business. And there's a culinary incubator program at the commercial kitchen. So for a small fee, considering, you can be a member of the culinary incubator. It goes for 2 years, and it sets you up to have all the food safety training and how to label, how to meet all those guidelines and requirements. So if you are producing cottage things like, oh, I have this backyard that's really hard to grow anything, but I was able to grow wild plums and aronia berries. So I've got all I need. I need to do something with it. So I'm going to make jam or jelly. Or my family that lives in maybe another county or somewhere else in Cole County has all these persimmon trees, and they're producing heavy, and I've got them. What do I do with them? How can I make some money off of them? And so there's a lot of opportunities for that. Right now, there's at least one group called Salad Slinger who tries to source locally out of the commercial kitchen at the culinary incubator program, and she sells her salads right there. And they're really good. Everything is as local as she can purchase it. There's a group that produces a salsa that uses local, any local produce they can. That slide that I showed you with the hot peppers, we donated lots to them so they could get their business started. So as you can see, there's a lot that's really an unlimited potential for what can happen there. Likewise, we're also the name will come to me in a minute. In addition to the City of Jefferson, we also have a lot of other community partners. So Jefferson City Schools are working with us, the Parks and Rec work with us, and Cap Region has actually already gotten started helping with some programming. And some of you may have been aware of a project through the Missouri Foundation for Health. It was Healthy Schools, Healthy Communities a little while back. And so a lot of the members that worked with that project are also on our coalition, so that we can kind of pick up some of the things that were done with that particular project and rejuvenate that a little bit. So that'll have a lot to do with farm to school programs. There's another movement and some additional funding coming through, which we are going to work to get landed in Jefferson City to really support that farm to school program, so that literally we can, the food that goes into the planting is already planned for out of local gardens first, and how we can do that in a sustainable manner for our kids. So I could go on for a really long time about all the people that are part of this coalition, but there are room for more. And so with that said, we've also are in collaboration with the folks who run the Columbia Farmers Market, because between the two of us, we feel like collectively we might be able to have a lot more pull. Their coalition is a little bit different focus than ours, so they're blending together really well already. So with that said, if you know people that might be interested in any aspect of this project, so not only are we talking about community gardens and urban agriculture, but we're talking about outreach and marketing and grant writing and fundraising. And for example, that video was actually produced by a small local minority-owned business, Walks TV. So there's a lot of room for practice and a lot of room for revenue and potential revenue for people who, and not to mention some exposure for folks with small businesses that really want to get started with something. The community gardens, we work pretty closely with the city, but as you can imagine, they're pretty busy. So we'd love to have someone who works already with the city, maybe in some other capacity, that can serve as a liaison, that can help with the planning and volunteer coordination, especially at a lot of the community events and the community gardens. Because as things grow, the vision is, as you could see, that not only have you got multiple community gardens, but you've got a farmer's market, you've got a locally run grocery store. I will also add that Charities is a partner with this coalition. So that's another network that will increase the availability of food to that South Side neighborhood. And then the programming. So this is where we've actually made some contacts with the Pringer Center and Department of Corrections, as well as vocational rehabilitation. And with Lincoln is currently working on, of course, with that academic situation. We're also working with technical schools to start folks with some of that technical knowledge, and those folks with the technical certifications are making a lot more money than PhDs. So there's just a lot of opportunity for vocational training. And so all of those things will find themselves a hub on the South Side. And that's really the vision. So it's right down there where all those things need to happen. So for people that would be interested in working with youth programming, adult programming, the Small Business Association here in Jefferson City is also a partner, and she's prepared to assist with that. And I didn't put her in there because I wanted to give her a little time. She's already said she would kind of lead it, but that's kind of a secondary phase. First phase is the gardens. We also, Cindy Borgwart is the head of the Culinary Institute, or Culinary Incubator, excuse me, at Lincoln University Cooperative Extension. So she's on there, and Shirley Seaball, Liz Cordray, those are Missouri Master Gardeners that are already doing a lot of gardening projects throughout the state and have a real focus on education as well. And then one of our other key partners with Lincoln is that Catholic Charities. So we're already working with Catholic Charities to bring chronic disease programming more available and where people need it in Jefferson City. So there's a Walk With Ease program. We're working on a diabetes prevention program and a few other things in the works. And then Elizabeth Anderson, as I mentioned before, is the outreach coordinator for Osage and Cole County, and is working directly with us on our food preservation workshops and lots of other things. She's also helps keep me in line with getting out agendas and holding our meetings. So she's awesome. And then of course, and our staff, Joshua Dunn is almost a full-time program assistant at Lincoln University Cooperative. One more week, we'll have him full-time. And we have a few more folks we're looking forward to hiring or getting on the payroll to assist with that so we can do more outreach. And that includes with the Salvation Army, a lot of transitional housing organizations we're working with to bring education and vocational opportunities to them as well. So thinking forward, we need your help. So I appreciate your time. I could go on about some of the projects, and we might certainly do that if we have some additional questions, or we can even back up and I can share some of the gardening projects a little bit if you like, and maybe dive a little deeper into the goals and strategies. So does anybody have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
So as I was listening to your talk, I was having good flashbacks to graduate school. Anyone who's gone through graduate school knows that those aren't necessarily good flashbacks.
Yeah, right.
But Dr. Adriana Prima, who was one of the professors in my graduate program, she did a lot of this work, but in Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
And as an anthropologist looking at community and those sorts of things, have you looked at what social scientists have been saying about community gardens? Because that's been going on for at least a decade, and that might help you with some of that outreach and reaching community members.
Well, it's interesting. So thank you, Dr. Boston. So
You call me Christine.
The question had to do with some of the body of work that's been done from the social sciences standpoint in terms of how community gardens work. And so my general answer to that is yes. I failed to mention was also a part of our coalition. It actually helped me do some of the grant editing was Dr. Amber Bell with over at the Department of Social Sciences. And of course, she works with the social work program. So we're actually working on another project that will link some of this into higher education and give students an opportunity to work directly with the community. But from that standpoint, that was part of why when we started talking about this community garden effort, it really was not the way it was done before. Because the way it was, when the whole big push for community gardens came out, and I remember this because I was an undergraduate when that started. You know, you really started to hear a lot about it. And I'm from Indiana, so that was always a big deal. Purdue hadn't even embraced it yet. It was really just up and coming. And so ultimately what happened was that we found that in some communities that worked, because the concept of a community garden was that everybody had their little plot and they farmed it, you know, with some help and oversight, and then they got those vegetables. And in having a conversation with the housing authority here in Jefferson City, we were working on a project a couple of years ago to reestablish the community garden at the senior housing here in Jefferson City, because of course there's some unique needs with the senior population, particularly where those things are clear up on the hill, even though they're on a bus line, right? So we were looking at their community garden, and whenever I asked them, so what happened that your community garden isn't still being used? Well, as it turns out, there was always a few people who did all the work or got really territorial, and then the rest of the garden overgrew. And I know Dr. Epple Farmer's here in our audience, and she and I were talking about the community garden, some of the other community gardens in Jefferson City. You could see some were just beautiful and some were kind of let to go away. And the problem is, for anyone who's done any gardening, you work so hard at keeping your garden in good shape, and somebody else right next to you has a ton of weeds, you have a ton of weeds, right? So we had all this space that was being not really utilized. And one of the things also we kind of grappled with is you can try to sugarcoat it, but gardening that takes some work, right? It can be a lot of fun, but it takes a lot of work. But that's why also I'm kind of happy to go back to this slide here, because and the focus with this is to have community groups that kind of oversee the garden so that it doesn't fall to that. And we also have done our own little mini experiments. So we had a little garden that was on Ashley Street that really didn't have much community buy-in and engagement as it was being built. And even though it was sitting there with vegetables on the vine, no one ate them. They stayed there and rotted. Even though there's lots of folks in that neighborhood who probably would have liked them, but they didn't know that they had anything to do with that. And I can tell you that these people knew that they had some stake in that. And this was not a lot of work. You know, we did a little potluck, and somebody turned, I think one of the two trucks turned the music on, and the kids were just having a blast. And it didn't last real long, but Bean Counter Urban Farm and Bible Way were monitoring the garden to make sure that it stayed weeded and watered, and that those things were available. And ultimately, I think one of their other plans this year is they would have some revivals, and they would have some other events related to the church over across the street. Once we figured out how to work some electricity, they're talking about a hoop. We talked a lot about cutting down walnut trees. I mean, there's a lot of activity kind of going on over there, right? So that was cool. And this was only a handful of people. But when people went, and the interesting part is a lady from up on the hill who had lived in the neighborhood many, many years and had talked and kind of reminisced with us about its demise, was very skeptical until we told her what was going on. And then you could see her face light up. Like, wow, this is going to be a safe place. Me and my grandkids can just walk down the back of this hill, and we have a piece of that, you know, because it's for everybody. So I'm hopeful with what we've seen in the past and versus what we do here, there'll be a little bit of diversity and flexibility. So would you care to share some of that anthropometric information or the anthropology about that? Huh?
It's Dr. Adriana's.
Okay, Dr. Adriana's contact. Okay, so hand it to me real quick. That's okay. I'll read it and to you all, and then we'll post it on our website and put it on our social media. So I'll share that with you momentarily.
All of our graduate students, when I was in graduate school, were doing community gardens in Canada.
Mhm.
So between the Cuban stuff and the Canadian stuff, I'm sure you can find stuff that
Right.
is gonna be applicable to this area.
Okay, so what she was sharing is that the graduate students working with Dr. Adriana Premet
Pre-med.
with the University of Western Ontario. We're working community gardens in Canada and Cuba. And so that data will be available online and we'll post it on the website. So if you go to Lincoln University Cooperative, you just Google Lincoln University Human Nutrition, that will take you to my landing page. I should say our landing page. And then there's also links to our social media. So our Josh is our social media king. And so he will have that posted available so that you, with a link so that you can check that out and see what they found. And so some of that data, particularly some of our key partners with the community gardens, that's the Master Gardeners, Central Missouri Master Gardeners, which is actually the most active Master Gardener program in the Midwest. I mean, they are pretty active. And likewise, Bean Counter Urban Farms, we're pretty familiar with some of these processes and what it took to really make those work in a more forward motion. So there, even within here in Jefferson City, there's a lot of community gardens that are doing different things. And one of the requests we had from Building Community Bridges is, can you put a sensory garden next to there's a small lot. So so Building Community Bridges contacted the landlord. Now the property is not exactly in the best shape, but it's got this little lot right next to it. And that's also not in very good shape. So it's probably not in a situation that you want to grow edible things there, but it's a great opportunity for a place to build a little park, things for sensory, so feel, touch, smell, and a place to showcase the artwork done by some of the youth groups that are working in that area, a place for the community to come and sit under a tree and maybe have some lemonade or enjoy some of the activities that go on. Festivals and things down there by BCB and Old Munichburg. Every Saturday, there's things going on, and Building Community Bridges has community events all the time. So it just pulls it in, and you know, we stand there and look at all this green space, and the city's going, yeah, let's do something with this green space. And so there's a lot of little lots that can grow a lot. And if you join us on the tour, you can see I think the Bean Counter Urban Farm will be a real showcase for what you can do with very little space. It's very cool. So good question and comment, and I appreciate that. Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else have questions or comments about this project and Arise JC? So but I want to make sure I do say this if I haven't said it, made it clear enough. So Arise JC is not, it's not me, it's not Josh, it's not one group of people. It is a collaborative effort. So as I'm trying to, I could stand here a long time, especially if I could read my own writing, of all the organizations that are really actively trying to take a part and be a part of this work. Several 501c3, several not-for-profit community organizations, faith-based organizations, the schools, a lot of different folks coming in to try to make this happen. And we're only just starting to see things materialize. So in addition to some of those things we were talking about, engaging those with developmental challenges. So they have other avenues and venues. And for folks who maybe feel like that, one of the issues that's coming up, particularly as we look at some of the equity issues, is this loss of a sense of community. So if you see people out in your neighborhood doing things, healthy and happy in situations, environments, some music, lemonade, out there doing things, you're more likely to come out and talk. And the community-based organizations that are working with Arise JC have actually gone door to door. Building Community Bridges was able to survey 120 people in that area to ask them what they thought about some of these things. And actually about 50% of the folks were really, yeah, this would be kind of cool. And maybe I'm not interested in gardening, but I'm interested in other things. And so that's what we're hoping to, if you'll forgive the pun, we hope to cultivate that, because there's so many more things than just growing the garden. You know, just like I was talking about, if you've got a senior that's living in an apartment there that can't stoop over the garden or sit and work in the garden, they can do other things. And if they're willing, We want to give everyone the opportunity to develop some skills or to try doing some things they may have no skill at, but just want to try or have some experience. And that transcends all the life cycle, through the whole life cycle. So for youth programming, young adults, and the tricky part is trying to engage young families, because, you know, moms and dads and aunts and uncles, everybody works, and it's a difficult situation. So if we have a safe community where the kids can walk a couple of blocks and there's the community garden and there's adults there that are kind of monitoring, oh, it's a community garden day on this lot, why don't you go over and help? Or if you are in a situation where you needs community service hours, like a lot of the schools and organizations, student organizations need community hours. There's a lot of opportunities to develop some of those youth programming. I know that one of the community-based organizations, a 4-H group, is starting up down there to get things kind of rolling. There's a lot of things that will happen as a result of this, but the only reason that it will happen is because people make it happen. And so Arise JC is about the collaborative work and effort, and really the intellectual capacity of the people of Jefferson City. And I'm not just talking about any of our legislators who are here for session and then maybe go back to their home municipalities. I'm talking about the people who live here and work here, or live and work, worship and shop here. So we want to tap into that, whether it's urban gardening, whether it is production of food into value-added products, whether it's the engineering of raised beds and ways to overcome flood issues or dry issues. There's a lot of opportunity for vocational development. So we're hoping that, you know, the vision is in 10 years, we'll see those things happen. On and on I can go. Anybody else have questions? And I can shut up now if nobody has questions, but please. Yes, sir.
You mentioned, I think, that the urban agriculture program in Columbia.
Mhm.
And are you familiar with the little carbon sink project that they have?
I think it's really similar to this focus on the climate smart. There's a tremendous push to make sure that what we're doing is climate smart. And so what's happening, and I'm not sure how many of you were aware that the Secretary of Vilsack came here to Lincoln about a couple months ago, I guess, and talked and launched the climate smart commodities, right? So in Columbia, you have a group of, part of that coalition includes the University of Missouri, the folks who do the farmers market, and Columbia Center for Urban Agriculture. And so the CCUA has been developing what you were talking about and making it a point to do that. And that's an organization that I have worked with in the past, and that I can't think of anyone I've met in that group that I don't just adore. And they are also on our list of collaborators, and they have been tremendous help because they're already doing a lot of this local work. So there will be a lot of opportunities to see what they have done and learn from their expertise. And I'm sure when we start talking about some of the programming, you're going to see us begging, we won't have to beg them, CCUA to come and do some of that programming. Because, so back to your question, I've seen that carbon seal. I don't remember it very well, but I remember when I asked someone about it, it was very similar to what we were working on here. And ultimately what that comes down to is that when you're really doing good agricultural practices, by and large, they are climate smart. It's when you run into situations where maybe the gaps are not being conducted appropriately. So that's where you run into climate issues. So we actually have a hydrologist at LU. And when I took him down to the Mulberry farm plot, he was already geared up to put in his carbon measure, you know, all of his equipment. And I can almost follow everything he says when he talks to me about what he wants to do. Almost follow every bit of it. And so I think you're going to see an agriculture station there and monitoring a Weir Creek, and a lot more work being done to check what the carbon emissions were at Mulberry before the farm and after, and what we are suspecting, especially if you go and talk to Courtney Gettner, who is the head of the community gardens, but she works full time. Okay, so she has a full-time, very demanding job. This is a hobby for her that's turned into bigger than that. And so if you get a hold of Courtney and start talking to her about some of that, she can rattle those things to you, because, and so can the Missouri Master Gardeners, because they're already focused on those types of things. And so between the fact that we now have this hydrologist who's got grant funding to be measuring that, we will, and then we've got another grant project in the works right now, which could further increase our access to some of those climate smart commodities and climate smart practices. But not only that, but also ways to demonstrate how what we're doing affects the climate in a positive way. And I looked something up the other day, and it's just, just kind of random. I am a dietitian by trade, okay? And my focus is on public health and chronic disease prevention. But I'm also a Missouri Master Gardener, mostly because I love to eat. I grow vegetables because I like to eat. I grow flowers because it makes me a more normal person. Okay, so with that said, my husband and I were traveling back from Indiana the other day, and we were talking, and I said, I was getting really annoyed with all the tree cutting that was going on, for power lines and things. And when I go walk the trail there, they've gone through and tripped all that, and have some friends that are loggers. And I'm always saying, so for how many trees did you cut down and how many did you plant? So I got to check in on it. Do you know that Missouri actually is fourth in the nation for trees per capita? Fourth in the nation. Yeah, that we have. There's only 3 other states that have more trees per capita than we do. I thought that was cool. Didn't mean I'm not going to call MoDOT and say all these trees you're cutting down, and who was it? Ameren UE, all the trees they're cutting down for some power lines and CenturyLink, so we can all have our fiber optics and whatever. I'm going to ask them how many trees they're planting elsewhere, right? But with that said, I was really surprised by that. And likewise, I thought, well, okay, so maybe we're not doing that all wrong. We've got some that, of course, a lot of that's down south, we're in the Ozarks because there are so many trees. And our population, we have double the land mass of Indiana. And Indiana has a lot of environmental issues because they've been very focused on other things. And now they're starting to work on it, right? You're starting to see that climate smart stuff as I drove through Indiana, because I'm originally from Indiana. So like 150 years ago, you didn't see that kind of stuff in Indiana. On my trips back, you're only just starting to see it, right? So I believe it or not, Missouri has a lot more on the forefront. And I think we're in a situation where Missourians appreciate locally produced food and small farms, maybe more so, or recognize the value of that, maybe more so than other states. So there's a place for large operations that use good agricultural practices and are monitoring their climate impact, because those are the groups that feed people. When you're talking, so the conversation I had with Scott Baker, who is the head of the Missouri Food Bank, right? In the middle of COVID, I said to him, I said, hey, we've got this produce program, and we were trying to be safe. We anticipate about 30,000 pounds of produce out of this little plot. He said, Sarah, I don't need a few bins of produce. I need truckloads to feed people. And we have at Lincoln, we have staff that was working really hard to increase food distribution sites in the rural Boot Heel area. We had staff that were helping people develop urban farms in the middle of COVID, including donations for plants and how to grow and running the workshops. And a lot of our staff in Kansas City doing the same thing, especially if you've ever been to Kansas City and their farmers market, it's a pretty big deal. So it's pretty excellent, right? So Lincoln's been quietly in a lot of those places. So Lincoln's quietly been in a lot of those places. But when I talked to Scott Baker, it sort of brought it home. And that was, you can't just have small farms. You've also got to have some large operations, but the ones that do it right? So that you can produce pork and beef and larger volumes of goat meat. You know that actually goat production in Missouri has become a thing. We don't hear about it here so much, but even 10 years ago, I had a friend who had a meat goat farm and was selling her milk and, couldn't keep it. She was selling it so quickly. So there's a lot of opportunities for anybody with a little bit of ground to have goats and even chickens. Now, the issue you run into is, as far as I know, I need to check on that. We meant to check on the ordinance for chickens, but I don't think it's much of an issue. But I do remember Columbia has an ordinance about backyard chickens. And where I used to live, which is actually the East Campus neighborhood, we had a neighbor whose chickens got out all the time. It was just the funniest thing ever. But of course here, you don't see a lot of urban chickens. Chickens can be expensive, right? And they're smelly, but there's a ways that you can compost the manure safely. So Lincoln's developing a compost facility and some programming in that area. And of course, that's a piece of our education is proper composting so that you don't get issues with watersheds, and that you're disposing of it properly so that it has a chance to do what it needs to do without contaminating things. That's part of the food safety training that we'll be working. That matter of fact, Josh and I are both working on additional food safety certifications to work with small producers as well as consumers so that we don't run that risk. And as we continue to work with the Center for Columbia Center for Urban Agriculture and our partners at the Columbia Farmers Market, LU, that we will continue to identify those climate smart practices and showcase them and encourage people to adopt them, particularly if they are not sure what they're doing. And as I was mentioning, there's a project right now, should we be funded, you'll see a lot more of that coming out of LU because there's some grant funding to really support people who are developing and producing climate smart commodities, which is really not a lot more other than all kinds of produce, whether it's meat, dairy, vegetables, or fruit produced in a climate safe and focused manner. And there's really kind of a lot of people doing more than you think. We'll be able to showcase that so that it's easier to imitate for a small scale farmer. So that's a really good question. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Sarah.
Did I? Yeah. Oh, is that?
So this is part of the lecture, or the Lincoln University Missouri Regional Library Lecture Series. I do want to announce our next talk, which is happening on Monday, June 20th at 6:30 in this room. It's medicinal marijuana, THC,